There was a big article that came out yesterday with Politico. It's called What Kamala Harris's Law School Years Reveal About Her Politics. So it goes into all of her time in law school, and basically I would guess the thesis is more or less is that she's not as progressive as she was in law school, that she's not she was, you know, for the people, fighting for the people, and she isn't as progressive, and she thinks was able to do work inside the system, but she actually isn't. And they quote all these people that allegedly knew her. So at one point they quote Paul Butler. Paul Butler is one of my favorite people. He goes on MSNBC and the brother annihilates it. He's a really, really great former prosecutor, Georgetown law professor. And they quote him to prove the point of this article. They quote his 2017 book, Chokehold. And they quote him saying this, which this was not about Vice President Kamala Harris. This was from his own book, saying, quote, "Every time I stepped into court and sat at the prosecutor's table, I sent the message that not every African-American man was like the bad dude I was prosecuting," unquote. And I thought it was really interesting because they almost use this as an example to prove their point. And I'm sure if Paul Butler read this, I'm sure he's thinking like Nene Leakes, why am I in it? Like, why am I in it? Because he has been nothing but incredibly supportive of Vice President Kamala Harris. He wrote this really incredible op-ed piece back in 2000 last year. What I'm talking about last year, saying that that the problem that Kamala Harris is having. Let me see if I have it here. I want to make sure I get the title right, because I don't want to use his words out of context either. He said Kamala Harris doesn't have a problem with Black men, and they shouldn't have a problem with her. Really, really great piece. So I'm reading this. I'm like, wow, y'all just kind of took, you know, Mr. Butler's quote and just, you know, used it as an example for your article, which I thought was kind of trifling. I thought that was kind of trifling to do. Then there is a quote from Brianna Joy Gray, who has been on my show before when, of course, Bernie Sanders was running for office. She came on my show. We couldn't get Bernie on, but, you know, Brianna Joy Gray came on. We could get Vice President Kamala Harris on, though. Interesting. Anyway, Brianna Joy Gray came on, and when she came on my show for Bernie Sanders, she was incredible. She was better than Bernie Sanders. I mean, she was really, really. I was like, wow, you're better than Bernie. But here's one thing that she says. She says, quote, "The idea that she, Vice President Kamala Harris, was going to change the system from the inside, while certainly not a unique perspective, is one that is somewhat naive. I say this with no malice, but there is not a progressive in America who was appeased," interesting word, "by Kamala Harris's appointment to the Biden team." All right. So long ass article. A couple of things. I just, as somebody who does a weekly show, a weekly segment called Exonerated, and I talk to people who are wrongfully convicted. And one of the things they have said to me over and over is that we never had a Black prosecutor. And not saying that a Black prosecutor would change everything. All my skin folk ain't kinfolk. Look at Daniel Cameron in Kentucky. But they say every single one we never saw a Black prosecutor. The idea that Black folks should not be prosecutors is just asinine to me. It's asinine. This system ain't going away. We're not going to abolish this system. We do need Black prosecutors. We do need, even outside of Black DAs like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. Now, I'm not saying we want a Black prosecutor like Christopher Darden. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that kind of prosecutor, but the idea that we shouldn't have Black prosecutors and they're somehow tainted because they're a prosecutor, I just don't know what that means when prosecutors are so crucial to what happens when we get in this criminal justice system. So that's bizarre to me. I will say, I've always said it, I'm not going to lie. My guy was Secretary Julian Castro. I thought he was incredible. I've always said it. He was my guy. But when Vice President Kamala Harris was the VP selection, you ain't gonna get more progressive than me. I'm damn near radical. Like you ain't gonna. There's things that I want that I know it's never, ever, 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 ever gonna happen on these United States. There's and I'm not saying I speak for the progressive, whatever. I mean, maybe whatever. But I was certainly happy. I was overjoyed. I thought it was a great selection. And then, and I'll hand it over to Reese. I think when we saw that it was a great selection was when she broke fundraising records. Mm-hmm. She literally made history. The amount of fundraising that came to the campaign, right? So this kind of hit piece, I don't really know what the agenda is. And maybe Mike Pence had the same kind of hit pieces. Maybe Dick Cheney, Lord knows he should have, had the same kind of hit pieces. Maybe Dan Quayle had the same kind of hit pieces. Maybe Joe Biden, vice president at the time. I don't know. But this is wild. And the other thing, quickly, I'm sorry. They also fault her, Vice President Kamala Harris, for not being able to push Joe Biden to be more progressive, not being able to make Joe Biden do these things that he didn't promise, but that she should be able to push him. And that isn't the role of the vice president. So it was very interesting to me. I was disappointed in the article. And yeah, but let's let Reese Colbert break down your thoughts on this.
Ooh, Chad, you know, they stay on my girl's head all day, every day. First of all, I've coined the term shitlitico because everything they put out about Vice President Kamala Harris is straight up bullshit. So I'm not going to refer to them as Politico. It's shitlitico. Okay. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. See, their aim is to be an extension of the Republican white males that are poised to run in 2024. They write all these puff pieces. They called, Rick Scott, who was a senator down in Florida, a contender for 2024. Since when? That's the first I'm hearing anything about it. They're Ron DeSantis's little fanboys. And so, they have an agenda when it comes to Vice President Kamala Harris. During her campaign, they wrote an obituary on her campaign months before she even dropped out. Every week it was a hit piece. So they're very clear in what their agenda is. To pick Brianna Greyjoy, who is a know-nothing about Vice President Kamala Harris, Brianna Greyjoy is a foot soldier of everything that's wrong with the white supremacist progressive left. I said it, okay? But she's getting paid, $30,000 a month on her little podcast to sit up there and beat a little blackface for the white progressive class, not race, a rhetoric that they like to say. So to pick her, who knows absolutely nothing about Vice President Kamala Harris's record, to comment on her appointment to be the VP in an article that's supposed to be about her law school tenure, what the fuck does Brianna Greyjoy know about Kamala Harris's law school tenure? She doesn't know shit. That's why she's talking about her appointment, and she's absolutely wrong about it. Vice President Kamala Harris's appointment was held throughout the party, maybe not on the shit left Twitter, but in terms of the polling, it all said that people were more enthusiastic about Vice President Kamala Harris being on the ticket. A lot of things that she doesn't get enough credit for the surge in turnout in certain areas. Right before the election, she was barnstorming Philadelphia. Y'all remember they were playing Optimistic and doing a two-step, the
Sound of Blackness.
So, you know what I'm saying?
She was all over Detroit.
All over Detroit, all over Atlanta. Nobody talks about that part. So she was very instrumental in bringing enthusiasm to the ticket and bringing a lot of things to the ticket. But let me just say this. I have written extensively about Vice President Kamala Harris's actual progressive prosecutorial history. I had an article in the Medium. It's called 50 Criminal Justice Reforms and Accomplishments by Kamala Harris. This is not a bullet point list. This is receipts. This is contemporaneous reporting of all the things that she has done. And a lot of the people that people like to tout as progressive prosecutors are following the Kamala Harris model, the model that she established in 2004, like establishing the first ever Back on Track program, which was about getting people out of jail when they were facing 20 years for 2 grams of crack. Okay. And instead of going to jail, she got them jobs, she got them counseling, parental counseling, et cetera, et cetera. And she went to her own Rolodex to get these people jobs. I interviewed Latifah Simon, who was an activist who went into the DA's office with then DA Kamala Harris. And she told me some just absolutely mind-blowing things that I wasn't even aware of, having done as much research as I have. So if you choose a Brianna Greyjoy over a Latifah Simon for your interview, you're full of shit. You're not interested in getting to the truth. And so she was called a progressive prosecutor back in 2004. All right. That was in the Los Angeles Times. That's before anybody knew she was going to run for president. They were calling her a progressive prosecutor back then. And I've actually written several different articles about this. I mean, when she was DA, she expanded neighborhood courts. And so when people talk about restorative justice and they're abolitionists and they don't want people to go to jail, she actually expanded neighborhood courts, which was, instead of these cases going into the criminal justice system, they went into these courts where they were adjudicated by neighbors, people within the community, and they did not have a criminal record. They were given fines or community service or whatever the people deemed was necessary. Those were the kind of reforms that she was putting in place back in 2004. So her record is actually unimpeachable if you look at the facts behind it, not the Lara Bazelon hit piece that she released in the New York Times, which was a fucking op-ed that was ridiculous, and all these other hit pieces from Jacobin and the shit left, which they were bound and determined to kneecap Vice President Kamala Harris, because she actually has receipts and all these things that all these people do nothing but talk about. So the bottom line is this. Progressive means nothing as a word if you cannot apply that to somebody who has the record and achievements of Vice President Kamala Harris. And so what the left has done is they've hijacked and Columbus and gentrified progressive so that it only applies to these white saviors like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and whoever the hell else. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say it once and I'll say it again. Kamala Harris is in the VP lane. She's in the Kamala Harris lane. She ain't got to be in this progressive lane. She ain't got to appease Brianna Greyjoy's funky ass. Girl, don't nobody care about your opinion. And Bernie Sanders disowned your ass too. As soon as he dropped out and you was talking shit, Bernie Sanders said, I don't know her. Like Mariah Carey. He went straight Mariah Carey talking about J-Lo on your ass. He said, I don't know her. So your opinion is irrelevant. Go ahead and continue your little funky ass podcast, which is losing subscribers, and keep Kamala Harris name out your mouth.
Mr. Johnson. Ted.
Yeah, I mean, how do you follow that? Good Lord. No, so here's a few things. One, the article is talking about Kamala Harris's political beliefs or stances 30 years ago. And it doesn't account for that many in the party have moved left since that time, when Kamala Harris has basically been Kamala Harris her entire life. So if you hold a steady view, if your politics are steady and the party moves, it doesn't suggest that you are no longer who you were. It suggests that that the world around you has changed while you have held your moral compass is not. So if she's not progressive by today's definition, that doesn't mean that she was never progressive. It means that the word has changed. It used to be a time where Republicans were the party of civil rights, and now they're not. Civil rights hasn't changed, but the parties did. So we have to account for the ideological shift in both parties if we're going to assess people's political beliefs based on things that they said or did, 2 or 3 decades ago. And frankly, Joe Biden knows this because Kamala Harris reminded him of things he said in the 70s and 80s that are no longer acceptable in the party now. And he had to move his views if he wanted to be the nominee for the party. So that's first. The second thing is, and I think the article does a good job of nailing this point home without spotlighting it enough. It's that she gained elected office first in the Black Law Students Association and then in local office and then state office. And Kamala Harris said on the campaign trail when she was running for president, 6 words that I'll never forget. It matters who's in those rooms. It matters. If you want to change a society, if you want to change institutions and structures, you have to get inside of them and create change there. There's a role for activists to work outside of the system to create external pressure. But if you're not in the prosecutor's chair, like you were saying, then how are you supposed to change a system that is racist? James Foreman Jr. has a great book out that talks about his time in Washington, D.C. at a time when the judges were Black, the policemen were Black, the criminals were Black, the public defenders were Black, the prosecutors were Black, and the correctional officers were Black. Now, you have a criminal justice system where crime is in a society where crime is happening, and in a society where people don't want crime in their neighborhood, and everybody in it is Black. And so what would you have those Black folks do in that city who wanted to make their city safe? Abdicate the entire system because it's racist? No, you use the tools at your disposal to create the change you want to see in order to create a system that is more just than would exist if you were absent from it completely and surrendered your sense of justice or your freedom and liberties to another group that doesn't have your lived experiences. So Kamala Harris is, look, when she was named vice president, and I was telling folks in 2018, if Democrats want to win in 2020, they better have a Black person on the ticket somewhere at the top or in the second spot. But if you want to increase turnout over 2016, then you need to have some descriptive representation. And like Reese said, Kamala Harris did her job. Do you think Biden Klobuchar would have won Atlanta, Georgia?
No.
You know, by the hairs of Biden's chin in Michigan and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania? No. Black folks turned out, and we don't have to guess at that. Donald Trump told us, he said all of the illegitimate places where votes were cast, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Detroit, where Black people live. Kamala Harris got those Black folks who sat out in 2016 to show up in 2020 and flip 4 states off the strength of Black voters alone, and some white suburbans who might have not liked Donald Trump, to deliver the election to Joe Biden. She did her job. And the last thing I'll say on this is, look, when you are a Black politician, you have to win a primary in the Democratic primary one way, especially in statewide elections, particularly, and nationwide for president. And then once you win that primary, you have to then move and attract a larger audience to win in the national or the statewide election. It doesn't mean you change. It means you spotlight, highlight different aspects of your record that will appeal to more voters in order to put you in those rooms that matter. So Kamala Harris didn't campaign as a progressive and then move to become a pragmatist as soon as she became vice president. She's been steady the whole way through. It's just that if you're smart, when you're trying to win in a primary, you talk about the issues that primary voters care about, and you stress all the ways that you're aligned. And then in a statewide or national election, you do the exact same thing to broaden the tent. She did her job. And if that isn't progressive enough, if having the first female Black, South Asian vice president isn't progressive enough, she is the one who convened all of the female senators in the Senate, no matter their party, brought them to the vice president's residence because she's trying to get things done for the country. When has that, who else is doing this stuff? If that ain't progressive, then, like Reese said, I don't know what that word means anymore. It can't just be, you have to support Medicare for all and free college. It has to be all of the things that are between where we are today and where we ultimately hope to be.
Yes.
That was good. You think you clever, don't you, Ted? You think you clever. That was good.
I have an ally. Woo-hoo. Yes.
We love David Swirlick from the Washington Post, but David would have had to be. We love David. You know what y'all are really nailing is that the standard of so-called progressive is so much higher for Black politicians. I have people who tell me that President Barack Obama was a centrist. I'm like, really? Because what it is that they, for some reason, they can't separate a politician and an activist. President Barack Obama wasn't George Jackson or Angela Davis. Nobody's saying that, but he certainly was a political progressive. He appointed more Black judges than any president in history. Black poverty goes down for the first time since 1968, as far as the numbers that it goes down. The My Brother's Keeper initiative, which he got hell for, the 2010 Fair Sentencing Act that nobody ever freaking talks about, the first sitting president to visit a federal prison. And they say the brother is a moderate, that if he were a white president of these United States, they would have said that he was freaking a reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln, who wasn't all that great himself. Who Abraham Lincoln had the Negro deportation policy, the Negro removal policy. But when you are a black politician, the level of progressive that you have to reach is so much higher. it's so much, it's so much bigger. And that's kind of what y'all are saying. The standard is kind of ridiculous when really, if you look at them compared to like you said, they were in their own kind of lane. But it's very interesting the standard and labels they put on Black politicians. So
yeah, can I say
go
something
ahead.
too about that? Because Elizabeth Warren, for instance, was a Republican until she was 47 years old. Okay. Now I know she ran when she was 70, and so she had quite a bit of runway. She's a little bit older than some other people who were running, but she was a hardcore Republican, and she lied about that because she was like, "Oh, I don't know why I was Republican. I don't know my family." But then when they did an article about it, her friend was like, "Yeah, she was hardcore. She was super Republican." So it's okay for her to what they call it evolve. They called her evolving. Meanwhile, as Ted said, Kamala Harris was consistent. I mean, I did a thread about how remarkably, extraordinarily consistent she was on all of her positions in terms of criminal justice reform for decades. Again, as Ted pointed out, we have shifted towards Kamala's position, not she has shifted more to the right. So that's something that needs to be acknowledged. Also, if you look at the Senate races, right, you have John Fetterman, who's a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. He's the person, he pulled a gun on a unarmed Black jogger, okay, and he lied about the situation. If you go back to the contemporaneous reporting and the police reports, that don't add up with his story behind it, and he's completely unapologetic about it. And yet you have the progressives that are like, "Oh, he's our progressive hero," and basically their point is, well, who really gives a damn about him pulling a gun out on this Black jogger, even though he's not apologetic about it. We're going to give him a pass because he likes Medicare for all and he likes free weed, or sorry, legal weed, and so to me, progressive is not progressive if you disregard the racial injustices in this country. And that's really a hallmark of the white progressive left, which is that it's class, not race. Y'all little Blackies can go to the back of the bus and wait your turn. And maybe if we address some of this racial stuff, cool, but the first thing you gotta do is pass Medicare for all. The first thing you gotta do is get minimum wage, and you Black mother effers can continue to get shot by the police. We don't care. And the white people continue to deputize themselves to become self-appointed slave patrols on you Black mother effers. And that's okay with us as long as we get our minimum wage and our Medicare for all. So that's not progressive to me, but that's what they have defined progressive for. And the white progressives get all the leeway to do whatever they do. And then the Black people are the establishment and neoliberal corporate shields and every other little slur that they have against them, and I'm sick of it.
And let me remind people, in 1984, Jesse Jackson was talking about a higher minimum wage and Medicare for all. But folks forget about that. 84 and 88, and they did him wrong. They did him wrong in 88, but that's a whole other story.